is Erica Chakowski with Baseline, and I'm reporting on the last day of RSA. Earlier this week, we took a walk along the show floor to have a little fun with vendors, ask them what they thought about the Hannaford Brothers breach. Unsurprisingly, most vendors had their marketing speak. They pretty much all said that they could have helped prevent the breach somehow or another. But what was interesting about these talks was the whole topic of compliance versus security. Lots of different opinions. Check them out in the following video.
Let's talk about the Hannaford breach. How could Tri-Cipher have prevented a breach like the one that happened at Hannaford?
Oh my goodness, that must be a terrific question to ask everybody here. I'm sure everybody has a different angle. Our particular angle on this is strong authentication. So we would have done everything we can to make sure that people logging onto the system, be they programmers or users, the systems that were compromised, were who they said they were.
Well, we're really focused down on the endpoint in terms of how things would be compromised. And, you know, kind of our strongest security element that's going to provide that kind of security is really whitelisting technology.
It seems like the breach at Hannaford occurred through malware that was installed on their PCs. We don't do anything with PCs.
What's the good of monitoring if you can't prevent something from occurring?
The one thing that, by not necessarily preventing the breach, I take that back, it does prevent the breach.
Could your product have really prevented a data breach like the Hannaford Brothers data breach?
No, not direct.
That's refreshing. How can you prevent a breach from, like Hannaford, from happening?
One of the things I've learned is if you're surfing sites that maybe aren't always the most kosher sites to go to, you maybe don't want to go to those sites unless your computer's configured right and set up right, because bad stuff comes down. I went to some sites accidentally a couple times. Bad things happen.
Accidentally, I'm sure.
But yeah.
So boothbabes.com, a safe experience.
Never really been to that. Good site.
The Hannaford breach was all about inside, from what I've been told anyway, insiders putting malware onto their computer system, which allowed the breach to happen. So NAC would have been key in stopping
They
that.
were PCI compliant, supposedly.
I don't know if Hannaford was compliant. They may have had that piece of paper
Yeah.
that they pulled out of their drawer,
Yeah.
that they got on the 27th of February in March and said, hey, look, we got the piece of paper. And that means absolutely nothing.
How relevant are any compliance standards, not just PCI, to security?
It's prescriptive enough that if you follow the standard and you are following the requirements, you're going to be secure.
Yeah.
So PCI doesn't mean that you're secure. PCI means that you have complied with the PCI regs. It's not a gold pass or a silver bullet to being secure. It just means you meet their regulations, not that you're secure. So PCI is a fine start, but it's not the be-all and end-all.
The vendor comes out and says, we'll make compliance, or we'll make security, we'll make PCI easy for you. To me, that's borderline offensive, right? Because it's not true. And the customer wants to hear that, right? The customer wants to believe it because it's hard, because they spend a lot of money, they don't feel fulfilled, because, you know, you'll have Hannaford Brothers, you'll have another breach, and you'll realize how vulnerable we really are. So when somebody comes riding on in a white horse and says, hey, I'm going to make this easy for you, just write me a check, you really want to believe that.
It's like telling the homely girl that they can make her a model,
well, you know, I'm not going to use lipstick and pigs and, you know, any kind of analogies along those lines, but it's true, right? People want to believe that.
Yeah.
But if they believe that, I like to say, well, they're pretty dumb.
What's the biggest lie you've heard from your competitors regarding PCI and data breaches?
Use our product and you can comply with PCI. Hear it all the time. It's confusing to the marketplace. Why? Because there's various pieces of the puzzle that need to be brought together, and when a single vendor stands up and says that they can solve the entire equation, it doesn't help anybody.
They're lying to you.
They are.
All sorts of vendors who would come in and say, I can solve this regulatory challenge. It didn't matter whether it was GLB or PCI or SOX, and it seemed whatever was hot at the time, they were an expert in that particular regulation. I've seen many people make this mistake. Oh, we bought this widget, so therefore we're PCI compliant, we're SOX compliant. It's a much bigger issue than that when you look at it. So, you know, my recommendation to people is understand what you're doing, understand what you're trying to protect, and then it will be obvious to you what the best technology is given your situation.
It's easier said than done.
Absolutely.
Yeah.